Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Genevision Media. Let's talk with. And today we are honoured to be interviewing Mr. Lenon Honor. Mr. Lenon is from America, um, and he is a life coach. He's a father, a very dedicated father and husband. He does a lot of work in the community, working with people, helping them with their relationships. He's produced a lot of documentaries. He has written books. He's very active on social media. He has his own YouTube channel. He has a Facebook page and he has his own website. So you can check those out. I will definitely put all the information down on the link bar when we finished this interview. But yeah, he's done so many things, and today we're just gonna hear a little bit more about him and his views on a certain number of topics. So, hello, Lennon. Please say hello to the audience and tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. Hello, Genevieve. Thanks for having me on, and hello to the listening and viewing audience. My name is Lenon Honor, and in the first place, I'm a husband and father. My wife and I, we have 5 children altogether. Our oldest is 13. Our youngest is 6. My wife and I, we've been together for 16 years. We had our marriage ceremony about 14 years ago. And my main platform these days is to promote positive relationships between men and women, but then also to encourage conscious parenting when children come onto the scene. In addition to that, I've done a lot of work, video work on YouTube. I've produced documentaries. I'm also a musician, but most importantly, I'm a husband and father.
Brilliant. So yeah, we're going to talk about some of the things that you've said, but I just wanted to ask you initially, as I am in the UK, and today we have actually had a what they suspect to be a terror attack on our tube network. So I don't know much information about it because I haven't been in tune with the news. I kind of had an alert on my phone, and then I got a phone call from my dad, who was actually on the train behind, explaining to me what had happened. But basically, they said that a bomb went off on a train. Luckily, nobody lost their lives, but apparently there was a few injured people. Have you heard anything about it, and what's your views on this whole kind of, terrorist attacks and the way that like the whole news network and every channel is always talking about these terror attacks, and nobody can do anything. I've heard from people in London saying that it's kind of like deserted, everyone's gone home and stuff because they're in fear. What's your view on those types of things?
Yes, I've done a lot of work on media manipulation. In other words, how media can manipulate massive amounts of people based upon how they report an event. In many cases, events are exaggerated because that creates more fear in people, especially traumatizing events. It may be an event that's not as traumatizing as or as significant as the news lets on, but how they report on it can definitely impact how people perceive that particular event. The particular event that you're speaking of today, I did see that earlier today on CNN. I didn't look deeply into it, but the thing that I thought about was that in my mind, and not to negate the significance of the event, it was not, I wouldn't consider it to be a major, if it is a terrorist attack, we don't even know that, but they always frame it that way. It doesn't matter what it is. Anytime you're dealing with a bomb or an explosion, and there is also the possibility that it wasn't necessarily a bomb per se, in the sense that it was some type of explosion that produced projectiles that penetrated people's bodies. It wasn't like that at all. But what tends to happen is that stories like these are reported on in such a way to wherein it strikes more fear in people than I think is probably necessary. This is part of media programming and what I call media manipulation. But the other thing too is this, that we've just passed September 11th, 4 days ago. And oftentimes what takes place is that during the weeks leading up to September 11th, and then there's also a time period after September 11th, any story that can trigger the trauma of September 11th is reported on, but more specifically, it's exaggerated. It's interesting because when I looked at the pictures and then even some of the video footage that they had showing even some of the quote unquote victims of this supposed terror attack, because we don't know that it's exactly that quite yet. Um, it wasn't a major. It wasn't anything major. It wasn't significant. It wasn't as if people were killed. Um, Nothing like that. I'm not trying to diminish what took place. What I'm saying is that the manner in which media reported on it, especially here in the United States of America, was as if it was, a megalithic destructive event that took place, and it was a terror attack that needs to be dealt with on a significant level because of the brevity of it, as if it was a major terror attack, which in point of fact, wouldn't consider it to be that, not to diminish the event itself. So the point is this, that yes, something took place, that people need to acknowledge that. And yes, I think that people need to be on guard. Should they be on guard any more than they normally are? Not necessarily, but media has promoted and propagandized the event to such a degree that it's put people in an extreme state of fear. And in my opinion, it's unnecessary. It's an unnecessary state of fear. And mass media tends to do that. They tend to promote fear-based programming. And what I've learned is that if you can use an event to traumatize people, they become fearful. And as they become fearful, they externalize power. And so long as they externalize power, you can maintain them in a state of control. And I think that that's really what this is about.
Definitely, I do agree on a lot of your points with that. And if anyone is really interested in knowing about media manipulation and kind of like the timeline, Lennon has actually he's done a whole. I think he's written a book, and
Mm-hmm.
he's talked a lot about the timeline of events, and you've actually predicted when things have happened, and it's not because you're any psychic or you've got a crystal ball or something. It's just that you studied the kind of timeline over the years, especially since like September 11th and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You studied the timeline of events, and you can literally predict. And the main point of talking about this, and even learning to understand about this, is to learn how not to let the media um, manipulate you and make you live in fear, because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the time what the media do, and I'm not trying to be like a conspiracy theorist or anything, but a lot of the time what the media do is they actually put things, make things, blow things up out of proportion,
Mm-hmm.
so that we're focused on that, and we're talking about it, we're thinking about it, we're going to sleep having nightmares about it, but also it detracts our mind from more important things like maybe our families and even things that are going on, and sometimes they even try to cover up a lot of things that are happening, because you may be aware that also in the UK we're going through quite a tough time um, trying to leave the Union. And that has caused a lot of backlash, because we're finding out that a lot of the things we were told in the beginning to kind of want to leave the EU is maybe was kind of false information. So as they're passing all these bills through, and doing all these stuff, we're not even thinking about that, because we're worried about getting on public transport. Um, and also they've also started the Grenfell Towers inquiry. I don't know if you heard about the fire that happened a couple of months ago. We had a
Oh,
very
yes. Mm-hmm.
yeah had a very big fire in London, and that inquiry has started also. So, all of a sudden, there's no news about it. We're not hearing about it because that's not important. So, we've got to keep our eye on the ball, and, make sure that we are not allowing um, other people to dictate how we feel. And it's interesting. I was watching one of your, I think it was one of your live streams, and somebody asked, "What was you doing? Um, in what were you doing during September 11th?" And it's funny, everyone can remember what they were doing at
Mm-hmm.
that time, because it was such a traumatic experience. I
Mm-hmm.
was 17 at the time, and I remember exactly what I was doing. Um, because it was such a traumatic experience. So, we've got to really be careful of, all of that is basically what I wanted to say. So moving on, we really want to talk about. You've recently done a documentary on gangster. Is it gangster face black rap? Is that what it's called?
Well, okay, so the main title is Beyond Gangster Blackface, and then the subtitle is A Critical Analysis of Gangster Rap.
Yeah, I got that completely wrong. Pardon my English.
That's okay.
Yeah, I've started to watch it, but I haven't got all the way through it yet. But can you just tell us a little bit about why you created this documentary and what it's about?
Yeah, sure. So there is a particular gangster rap group. It's probably the gangster rap group that people most associate with the subgenre of gangster rap, and that gangster rap group is called NWA, Niggas with Attitudes. And recently, well, maybe about 2 years ago, they had a movie that came out. It was a film biopic, and it was big. It was huge. And the thing was that even before the movie came out, I heard that they were producing the film, and I thought that that was strange because what I remembered when I was growing up in terms of NWA was that they weren't necessarily a positive. They didn't necessarily have a positive message. And then I thought about the fact that usually what takes place when movies like that are made is that it's a revisionist history. You rewrite the script, you rewrite what actually took place, and you try to paint a gangster rap group that really had a negative effect on the community. You paint them in a positive light, and that's precisely what they did inside the film. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to put together a critical analysis of NWA, and to ask critical questions in terms of the significance of their lyrics and the lyrical impact, or the impact that their lyrics had on the community. And what I did was initially, I think we had, I think 6 interview guests. We expanded that to 12. And then there's people who actually grew up in Los Angeles, and that's where NWA originated in the city of Compton. And we actually have quite a few people from Compton who actually appear inside the document, and they give their perspective, positive perspective, in some cases negative perspective. But what they say and what they share is quite profound in terms of the impact that NWA had on the community back then. What I add to the equation is more statistical analysis. And what I did was I listened to all of their albums, 4 albums of music, and I went track by track, and I listened to each track, and I wrote down what were the most frequent words that were being used for each song. I compiled that for each album, and then I compiled all of that for all 4 albums. And then I did further analysis in terms of how frequently you hear certain words. Also analysis in terms of the common themes, or the most common themes. And what I found that throughout all of their 4 albums, the most common theme that was presented in their lyrics is the disrespect of women. Now, there's other things too that they promoted: gang culture, the disrespect of men, for that matter, the use of the word bitch, calling women bitches. I mean, it goes on and on and on. The point is that very little of their lyrical content in terms of all 4 albums was actually positive, nor did it have a positive impact on the community. But that particular core issue of the disrespect of women as being the preeminent theme presented within NWA's lyrics, I think we should take a step back and just ask the critical question: why, out of all of the hip hop groups that have ever existed, why would this be a group that would receive a film biopic, and then within that film biopic, this group is painted as somehow socially conscious? So what the documentary does, it deconstructs the myth that somehow this particular rap group, this gangster rap group, had a positive impact. But the thing is that the methodology that we used in our analysis and our analyses can actually be applied to any group, any hip hop group, any genre of music. It can be applied to the music, the television shows that people are watching, the movies that people are watching, the books that people are watching. And the idea that was for me that ultimately I want to provide parents and children, for that matter, with the intellectual tools needed to be able to determine whether or not whatever it is that they're viewing or listening to is in their best interest. And obviously, a genre of music that promotes the disrespect of women as being the preeminent theme is not in the best interest of anyone, in particular, not in the best interest of the Black community, given the state that our community is in with respect to male-female relationships.
Wow, that's quite deep because obviously I have to be honest, I haven't watched the movie. It's not really kind of my cup of tea. Probably something I should kind of look at, just for the fact of, you're right. It is, these NWA and these kind of people, they are portrayed as, conscious kind of rappers, and they're the first ones. that kind of, you know, to kind of give us knowledge, you know, and those types of things. However, is it really positive when you're being very disrespectful to women, you're portraying a certain type of lifestyle, which we're seeing now is causing so much problems, you know, in the US and in the UK and all over the world. Um, you know, it's just not a realist way of kind of going forward. Have I lost my I don't know what's happened there.
No, I see you.
Okay, I thought
Yeah.
it went. Um, yeah, so you know, it's it's strange that we would consider that. I've just had someone in the chat saying that Ice Cube is conscious. So, what do you have to say to that?
Conscious is relative. Furthermore, we have to look at, are we talking about Ice Cube when he was in NWA, or are we talking about Ice Cube, the current Ice Cube, as the grown man? Because the point of fact is that the truth of the matter is that he has grown significantly. In fact, he's had a great deal of success, and I can appreciate that in terms of his career as an actor. But then also he started up a league, a basketball league that has had a lot of success and is providing jobs for people. So he's done some fascinating stuff, some wonderful stuff in more modern times. However, back in the late 80s, going into the early 90s, was he conscious? Not necessarily. The other thing is this. Ice Cube was with the group for the first 2 years, and he was the primary writer for the lyrics in that group. One of the reasons why he left the group was because he was not compensated appropriately for his contributions. And when he left, there was a bit of a beef that ensued, wherein the remaining NWA members disrespected him, and then he would do on his, because he became a solo artist, which he did. He actually had a wonderful career as a solo artist, and he was going back and forth, and they were disrespecting each other back and forth. Was that conscious? No, that's not conscious. Whether it is verbal violence or physical violence, we can't say that somehow that behavior, the beefing, the disrespecting each other, the calling each other niggas and, excuse the language, fuck boys, so forth and so on, that somehow that's what it means to be conscious. Ice Cube, during that time period, he was in his late teens and early 20s. The other thing is this, that once he went on and pursued his solo career, that he did begin to infuse more socially conscious ideas. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he was socially conscious. And the other thing is, on a deeper level, we have to also recognize that our mentality and our own mental aptitude, when we first were exposed to Ice Cube, when he quote unquote went conscious in his solo career, our interpretation of consciousness during that time period is based upon our limited intellectual understandings of that time period. And part of what is important for us to do is to begin to think critically about what our belief systems were when we were that age, and recognize that as adults with proper intellectual process, but also with critical thinking, that if we went back and listened to Ice Cube while he was quote unquote conscious, once he went solo, we should probably ask the question, was it really conscious? And based upon our standards today as grown people who have a level of intellectual process where we're more wise, we can't call that conscious, not at all. But based upon a child's mentality, we may perceive it to be conscious based upon when we were, younger. So this all to say that, again, consciousness is relative, and the notion that someone is conscious, that is also relative. What you have to look at is stats and statistics. And I would propose that if anyone did a critical analysis and a statistical analysis of Ice Cube's body of work in terms of once he quote unquote went conscious, it would most definitely be more conscious than what he did when he was with NWA. But in the bigger scheme of things, I wouldn't consider it to be conscious. Here's the thing. Let me say this, that what consciousness is not simply talking about problems or talking about how other groups of people are harming us as Black people. What consciousness is taking responsibility for our situation and our circumstances and building something that reaches into the future that is going to be the solution to those problems. And I will tell you this, that the solution to many of the issues that we are facing as Black people all around the world has more to do with our inability to establish positive male-female relationships in healthy family institutions when we are raising our children with love, and when we are raising our children to be conscious people at earlier and earlier ages. Now, I would always ask the question, did NWA promote anything about positive male-female relationships or healthy families, raising your children, being there for your children? Providing your children with love and care and protection, did they promote that? Absolutely not. Here's a deeper question. And Ice Cube in his work, and once he went solo, did he promote positive male-female relationships? Did he promote healthy family institutions? Did he encourage young Black males to make sure that they are dedicated husbands to their wives, and also that they are dedicated fathers to their children? Okay, so that's what I'm saying. Conscious is relative, but the point that I'm making here is that what I perceive to be conscious, it must also, whatever consciousness means, however we want to define it, that it also has to provide solutions. And simply complaining about or talking about what we think other people are doing to us, it doesn't necessarily provide a solution. What provides solutions is changes in behavior that actualizes a new reality and a better reality for Black folk for generations to come. And I will tell you that the greatest challenge facing Black folk today is male-female relationships in the state of our families. And until those two things are addressed, we can't necessarily assume that something is conscious. When we address those two things, now we're getting into consciousness, in my opinion.
Wow, that kind of just blew everything out of the water. Before you actually finished saying that, somebody wrote in the chat, blame the rappers but not the parents, and you kind of just touched on that in terms of, you know, that is what we should be focusing on.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that is kind of going against that is it's just not what we need. Do you know what I mean? So regardless of, you know, are we really gonna continue in this kind of mindset? I mean, to be honest, I don't have, because I haven't watched the film, and to be honest, I'm not really a hard head hip hop. You know, it's not my era. You know, I hear things on the radio and stuff, but I wouldn't say that I would purchase, like I would run out and purchase. However, the new Jay-Z album was quite interesting, but that's another story. But you know, I totally agree that anything that is kind of focusing on something that is not making us do better, is kind of, it's just going against what we need. And are we going to continue to allow people to do things and say things, still using the N word, still using the P word, still using, you know, being derogatory in all these kinds of ways, and you know, and to say, oh well, that's just them, that's how they grew up. No, because would you allow your children to do that? Do you know what I mean? Would you allow, if somebody spoke to you like that, how would you feel? Somebody's written in the chat, this gangster rap and the disrespect of women you mentioned is directly related to the issues Black men and women families face today in terms in interrelations. Anti-woman attitudes are so normalized.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they are normalized. And here's the other thing I just wanted to mention. You had brought it up earlier. Blame the rappers, not the parents. The thing is that everyone is responsible. And see, one of the things that, and we outline this in the film, people don't realize how much of an impact rappers have, or just media in general. We talked about this earlier. You know, media can manipulate people into extreme levels of fear unnecessarily. So what, do we blame the people who are in a state of fear? Are the parents of those people? No. Okay. And the thing is this, that it's not about blame. It's about seeing what are the contributing factors to the quality of life that people are experiencing. And one of the things that people do not realize, and please hear me on this, is the overwhelming influence that rappers have had, and not just rappers, but I'm just using that as an example, over the minds of young impressionable children. And in many cases, hear me when I say this, rappers have more influence on young impressionable minds of children than their own parents in some cases. Okay, so let's be clear about this. Parents need to do a better job in terms of protecting their children's consciousness or their children's minds from the negative media programming that's out there, which includes rap music or hip hop or gangster rap. There's a whole plethora, porn. There's a whole list of stuff that we can go through. But the other thing is that somehow, to defend those who are producing the negativity in the first place, that they are to be excused to, I don't believe in that. That's one of the things that I'm very clear about. And I'm going to say this here because I think this is a whole nother topic that needs to be dissected, that far too many Black people make excuses for deviant Black male behavior. We make too many excuses. We come up with all types of excuses, and then we wonder why the levels of dysfunction continue to perpetuate itself, whether that is in male-female relationships or in different degrees of dysfunction within males that can lead to the criminal justice system, or place these young males into the prison industrial complex, or into early graves. But we spend so much time trying to defend the dysfunctional behavior as opposed to being critical of the behavior, so as to develop corrective measures to that behavior. And until such time that we do that, we will continue to perpetuate the same levels of dysfunction that has been perpetuated for many generations now. We have to stop that. We have to set a higher standard for Black male behavior all the way across the board. And for us to try to defend that behavior is completely counterproductive in terms of the upliftment of Black people around the world.
Powerful. And what about women? Because I know that there's going to be people that are going to hear what you've got to say and say, but the woman does this. The Black woman's got attitude. She's got mouth. She's, she's disrespectful. She's not submissive. All these types of things. So is that an equal and the same as, or is it something that is not as important? What do you think?
Well, no, it's equally important. The thing is, again, it's not about trying to blame any person or any gender. It's not about that. It's not trying to blame the entertainment industry or NWA. That's not it. It's really about analyzing what are the problems and why do the problems exist, and what are the strategies that need to be implemented in order to solve these problems. It's really that simple. The thing is this, that what I have found, which is interesting, is that when we talk about deviant Black male behavior, you will find that to a great degree, there are many women who defend that behavior. Okay, so these are things that need to be correct. And this is, to me, it's really, really deep. Like, why is it that a woman would defend NWA? Why would it be that a woman would defend a man who is an absentee father? Why is it that a woman would defend a man who calls women bed wenches or maggots? Or stripper thoughts? There are men in the Black community who are considered to be leaders, and they get major support from Black women. And these are the terminologies that they use when they talk about Black women. So yes, again, it's not simply about deviant Black male behavior. I would consider that to be a deviant female behavior for women, for whatever reason, want to support a man whose whole platform is about disrespecting women. It's really, really to me. So this to say that no, the responsibility, the onus in terms of solving these issues, it's not one-sided. Black men and Black women need to come together to figure these things out. But here's the thing: some of the ideas that are presented about Black women, and they're presented as a generalization, which is a problem in the first place, need to be dissected. Black women have attitude. Okay, well, here's the thing. Not all Black women have attitude. And for those who do, it's not like they want to have attitude. Most women don't want to walk around having attitudes. Most men don't want to walk around having attitudes. They have a reason, whether you consider it to be legitimate or not. They have a reason to have a particular attitude. There are many Black women who develop negative attitudes towards men because they've been abused by men, and they haven't had a healing modality to when they can begin to trust them anymore. So why wouldn't they have an attitude? And a lot of times what men perceive to be an attitude is simply a defense mechanism. The woman is trying not to be hurt again. So it's deeper than just making a sweeping generalization about all Black women that they all have attitudes. That's simply not true. Deeper still, if a man of integrity, and I'm going to use that word a lot, a man of integrity, what he does, he says, some women have attitudes, and those attitudes are too much for me. So therefore, it's not about women, it's about you. You can't handle that attitude. And you know that there are plenty of Black men who know how to handle a little bit of that attitude. And there are some Black men who find it to be attractive. Okay, I don't necessarily find it to be attractive, but so be, as a man of integrity, don't make sweeping generalizations about, and women shouldn't do that either. Don't make these sweeping generalizations about Black men, wherein ultimately you're downgrading all Black men simply because of your own personal experiences with a few. Another one you brought up is that they're disrespectful. The other thing is this: we have to be very clear about this, that in general, human beings give people respect based upon how they've been treated and how those other people have treated them. In general, that's what happens. But what has happened for a lot of Black women, and also for a lot of Black men for that matter, is that they have already been harmed by their species half. And what I mean by that is men have been harmed by women and women have been harmed by men, to when they develop levels of disrespect that is sourced from their lack of trust. And so, as a defense mechanism, they're just disrespectful. Does that mean that all black men are disrespectful towards women? No. Does that mean that all hip hop artists are disrespectful towards women? No. Does that mean that all black women are disrespectful towards men? Absolutely not. Now, what you can say is that some women are disrespectful, or some women are too disrespectful for me. You see my point? The other thing is, black women, they have too much mouth. In other words, they talk too much and they're too opinionated. Well, again, it's a sweeping generalization, but the deeper issue is that as a black man, you have to come to grips with the truth that maybe she has too much mouth for you. In other words, maybe she talks too much for you, and you can't handle that. You're not verbally mature enough and emotionally mature enough to handle a woman who talks too much, in your opinion. Okay, well, just say that woman in particular, she talks too much for me. It has nothing to do with her. It has everything to do with your inability to handle a woman who talks that much. But guess what? There are plenty of men out there who they actually can handle a woman who has a quote unquote a lot of mouth. And there are a lot of men who are attracted to women like that who have a lot of mouth. And then the last thing, and I think this speaks to the issue of sexism. A lot of this is sourced out of sexism. That's one of the problems in the black community, is that we tend to focus on global white supremacy, and we put so much focus on it that we don't even address the supremacist ideologies that we have as black men towards black women. In other words, we don't tend to deal with sexism. We tend to throw that completely. And I think that's a lot of reason why black women have a difficult time having levels of trust for black men, because the core issue, which is a global culture all the way across the board, doesn't matter what quote unquote race you are, ethnic group, sexism is real, and it's impacting all women at all times all around the world. But as black men, we tend to stay off of that topic. Understand this, that the notion that a woman needs to be submissive to her man, that is a sexist ideology. It comes from a sexist ideology. In the video series that I'm working on right now, it's called How to Prepare for a Positive Relationship with a Woman. I actually talk about some of the sexist views that I have held. And see, part of what we do as men of integrity is that we don't dismiss our own iniquity. In other words, we don't dismiss and ignore what it is that we need to work on within ourselves that is causing problems in our lives or in the lives of others. And I give examples of things that I am working on in terms of sexist views, and things that I have worked on so that I can be a better man, that can be a better man of integrity. Well, the same thing applies to this notion that somehow women need to be more submissive. You will find too that there are a lot of black women that what a black man perceive to be a lack of submission has more to do with the fact that a lot of black women have had to handle everything, especially when it comes to raising their children, wherein you have this profound reoccurrence of black males abandoning their children and abandoning their partners. And so you have women who have to not only take care of the children, but everything else. And so therefore the notion that they have to submit, quote unquote, to a man who's not even present, that's ridiculous, let alone some other man who wants to come onto the scene. The woman is trying to make a way for her children. She's trying to make a way for herself. And she gets accustomed to that because there hasn't been a black man to come along who will be able to provide her with the levels of support and levels of love that she definitely needs. And of course, the level of support and love that her children need. So that's what I'm saying. It's a lot deeper than making a general statement that somehow black women are not submissive. The notion of being submissive comes out of this notion that men are to be the quote unquote heads of the households. I don't believe in that. I think that it's an antiquated concept. It's rooted in sexism, and that's a concept and an idea that we definitely need to transcend as black men, especially if we want to put ourselves in a position to be in a positive relationship with a black woman. And here's the thing: the proof is always in the pudding. And what I have learned is that black males who defend this type of ideology, and they have these types of sayings, they are not prepared for a positive relationship with the black woman, and they won't be in a positive relationship with a black woman anytime soon. See, the difference is that as I've worked on myself, not only have I been able to be in a positive relationship with my wife, but we're going on 16 years now. We're raising 5 beautiful children in the process. So at the end of the day, we have to look at stats, and we have to look at what's real. And it comes down to what it is that you want to achieve. Do you want to continue to, as a black man, do you want to continue to perpetuate negative, dysfunctional relationships? Well, guess what? Hold on to these types of ideas and continue to defend the quote unquote fuckery, as we say here in the United States of America, because you will continue to get what you're getting. But if you want to establish a positive relationship and you want to be able to raise a happy, loving family, well, I would suggest that you take heed and take note, because what I'm sharing with you all here is precisely the knowledge that I have learned within the context of my relationship with my wife. And if what I have learned has benefited me and has allowed me to be in a positive relationship with my wife based upon my upbringing, then it can also be applied to any black man out there.
Wow, that is very powerful because obviously you've brought to us like you tore down a lot of the ideologies that we're made to believe in how a relationship should go, and you've also in the same breath proved that it works. You know, the way that you the way that you do you conduct your relationship really does work. So that kind of brings me on to this topic. Before I go on to the topic, I just want to kind of say a bit of history about me and you and how we kind of connected. You probably don't know this, but I've probably been watching you online for about 8 or 9 years. I
Oh, I didn't
think,
know it was that long.
yeah.
Okay.
Um, I think I was pregnant with my youngest son, who's 8 now. So yeah, it's been probably about that long. Um, yes, I've been watching you. Obviously, you've grown and transcended and gone into different genres and topics and stuff. But we actually connected about 5 years ago now. I think it was 5 years ago. Um, I was going through a really bad time in my life, and Lennon was giving free counselling sessions. Well, he offered a free counselling session on his Facebook page in honor of Mother's Day. He
I
wanted to
remember
celebrate
that. That's
mothers.
right. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Hmm.
And so I reached out to him. Like, I was like, should I do it? Should I not? Should I do it? I need help because sometimes you just gotta do it. You know what I mean? I reached out to him and we connected. And I think it ended up being about 10 sessions. We had was it about 8 or 10 sessions. I can't remember. But um, it was very powerful, and even up until this day, not only am I so grateful to you reaching out and speaking, and taking the time out for me to. I think you kind of use the terminology of you need to clean out the skeletons in the closet, so you have to take everything out, clear
Hmm.
everything out, and then kind of put it back in because I
Hmm.
was kind
Hmm.
of at a point where I was just always frustrated. I'd been through a couple of bad experiences at the time. I was just in a bad place in my life, and I was just like, I was probably one of those angry black women. Actually, I was probably one of those angry black women. So but at the end of the day, I also learned from that everybody has a reason why they behave a certain way. Like you
That's
said,
right. Hmm.
could have been hurt by somebody. They could. There's always an experience to why somebody behaves the way they do. So rather than just be upfronted by what they're doing to you at the time, just take a step back and think, well, why are they? What has happened to them? And maybe
Mm.
even talk to them to find out. So anyway, we went through those sessions, and that really kind of helped me to kind of because there was a lot of stuff. I think there was even things going back to childhood that kind of needed to be looked at rather than just the initial problems that I was having at the time. So that really helped me, and I would say to anybody, even if it's not Lennon, but get in contact with somebody and get help because especially like this year, I've it's come to my attention that there is so much kind of hurt, and there's mental health problems and stuff in especially in the black community
That's
that.
right.
And another thing that I've noticed is that we are the last ones to kind of deal with it. We'll find every excuse under the sun to blame before we get to what I actually need help. So
Hmm.
we really need to take stock on that, and that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, that deal with it before it gets to the point where something crazy happens. So yeah, we connected 5 years ago, and then I think about 2 or 3 years ago, Lennon came over to UK. He was actually supporting. Who was it? It was they were doing the Urban Kryptonite
Hmm.
DVD like launch, and Urban Kryptonite, if you don't know, is about not eating meat. So I know there's a lot of people in the chat room that are kind of trying to transition. Yeah. And I even have one of my girls, we're trying to like, because I've been flip flopping for years. It's just been a joke. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I have been the worst like, don't ever do what I do. Like, I flip flop, and I think even Shay in the group, she's actually started an Instagram page of cooking food and stuff. Yeah, she's put proud vegan. So yeah, there's a lot of, we're getting it in the UK now. It's like really, it's really kind of going. But I think as we spoke earlier today, I'm going to be interviewing your wife, and she has a lot of knowledge on that. So I'm definitely gonna get some tips on her, because she was actually the first vegan cookbook that I bought. Was her cookbook. So that opened my eyes to a lot of things, because I was like, what do you do when you don't eat meat? What the hell do you do? And it was just like, I was confused. So yeah, but yeah, so we met at this event, and it's just been like, just seeing Lenon grow, and he talks a lot about his family, which to me is just so inspiring. Like, to me, that I just want to be an extended part of their family, because they're just so open. Their children are just so lovely, and they're so, when I say open, like, they talk about the good and they talk about the bad that
That's right.
happens. And
Hmm.
sometimes people like to front a lot, and they like to just make out, yeah, everything's perfect all the time. Sometimes
Hmm.
things aren't always perfect, but it's
That's
just
right.
the process
Mm.
of working through. And I do not know how they manage with five children, and they're entrepreneurs, so they work from home, they do everything from home, and they homeschool. So in my opinion, they're not even human. Leave for that, because I can barely get through the day. Like, seriously, and I've only got two, so I don't know how they do that. But yeah, so you're doing a new series on positive relationships. So I just want to kind of, obviously going to talk about that, but I just kind of want to start from the beginning. Um, Single people, like, there's a lot of, especially single women, but I'm seeing that there's also a lot of single guys, but single women, they're always like, I can't find the right man. There's no good men out there. All these kind of stuff, and a lot of times they have very bad experiences with men. Sometimes they look like the knight in shining armor, and then a couple of months down the line, we find out no, it's not. Excuse me. So, speak on just a little bit about, how do we actually start looking for the right relationship? Where do we look for the people? What do we have to do with ourselves?
Yes. Well, all relationships start with self. So, in the first place, it's the relationship that you have with yourself. And I have a saying that all relationships are based upon the value that you place on yourself. In other words, how you value yourself is going to it's going to have a huge influence and impact in terms of the types of relationships that you're going to consider being in, let alone being in. And this applies to both men and women. The video series that I just finished is how to prepare for a positive relationship with a woman. It's specifically geared towards men, but women will find value in it. But the thing is that the same principle and the same rule applies when we talk about preparing for a positive relationship. It has to do with, in the first place, you. What are the things that needs to be worked on within you? And I have a saying too inside the video series that the greatest relationship challenge facing most men and women, for that matter, is our mentality. It's the mentality that we have. And on three basic levels, the mentality that we have about ourselves, that gets to self-value, self-worth, and self-esteem. Again, all relationships are based upon the value that you place upon yourself. But then, let's say, as a woman, it's also based upon it's based upon your mentality, the mentality that you have towards men. For you men, the mentality that you have towards women. You have to take a critical look at that. You'll be surprised at how many negative thoughts people have, men and women. Men having negative thoughts. We talked about some of that earlier. Negative thoughts and negative mentality about women. Women have negative thoughts and negative mentalities about men. There are no good men out there, as an example. I'll never be in a positive relationship. Another level to this is our mentality about relationships. When we say things like, there are no good men out there, there's no good women out there, I'll never be in a positive relationship. That's a very negative view. And what it speaks to is a limited mentality. And what you find is that the more limited your mentality is about your species have, meaning as a man, the more limited your mentality is about women. As a woman, the more limited or negative your mentality is about men. Also, your mentality about yourself, the more limited it is, the more restricted it is, and the less likely it will be that you'll be prepared for a positive relationship. Let's use some logic here. What is the probability as a woman? What is the probability of you establishing a positive relationship with a man if you have a negative mentality about men? Let's flip it around for you men out there. So when you're calling women bitches and hoes and thoughts and maggots and bed wenches, and you say things like, you know, they have too much attitude, or they're disrespectful, or they're not submissive enough for me. Okay, that's a very limited and very negative view about women. What is the probability of you as a man where you hold that type of mentality? What's the probability of you establishing a positive relationship with a woman? It's zero. It's simply not possible. So that's what I'm saying, that it all starts with self in the first place. You have to deal with your mentality as a man and as a woman, and you have to begin to process the negative thoughts. And see, so many of us were resistant to that, because a lot of the thoughts, the negative thoughts that we have, it goes back so far in time. For a lot of women, it can go back to being abandoned by their own father. For some men, it can go back to their mother mistreating him, or maybe their sisters teasing them when they were young, or maybe they were rejected. That one of those girls that they thought was cute and they wanted to be in a relationship, that he was rejected. So he starts developing these for a lot of us, and I think this was probably my case in terms of my negative mentality, is in particular about relationships, is childhood imprinting. What we saw as children, the dysfunction that we saw in our parents, begins to influence how we perceive male-female relationships, and we develop a very limited and very negative view. Well, what's the probability of being in a positive relationship if you have a very negative view about relationships based upon what you saw your mother and father, and abuse and verbal abuse and physical abuse and physical violence in the home and levels of disrespect, so forth and so on, cheating, and you saw all that when you were a child. So that's what I'm saying, that ultimately it's not about trying to get out there to find someone, because that's like going out to find someone but not being in a state of personal healing so that you can have clarity about what's possible. You're going to go out and try to find someone based upon a limited mentality, you know, and not just mentality, it's also our emotions, you know, how we feel about women as men. There's a lot of men who have very negative feelings about women based upon past experience. There's a lot of women who have when you bring up men, they can become very emotional. It's very negative emotions that take place for a lot of women. Well, what's the point of even trying to pursue a relationship when you have you're in that type of emotional state? So what I'm saying is 4 basic levels when we talk about preparing. It's not about going to go look, it's about preparing yourself. Because even if you find one and you're not prepared for it, what's the probability of it being successful? 0. So on 4 basic levels, you have to deal with your mentality. You have to deal with your emotional states. You also have to deal with the language that you use when you talk about relationships, when you talk about women as a man, and when you talk about men as a woman. We just gave an example, and there's women who have these horrible things that they say about men. Well, if you have that type of language and it's always coming out whenever the topic of men come up, and you have these negative emotions that come up, and then there's this negative mentality, and everything filters down from your mind. Your mind influences your words. It influences your emotional state. It also influences behavior. That's the 4th level. So part of what I'm saying is that in the first place, you have to deal with yourself. You have to work on your thoughts, your words, your emotional state, and your actions with respects to 3 basic levels. You as a person, how do you feel about yourself as a man? How do you feel about yourself as a woman? Of course, your thoughts, how do you think about yourself as a man? How do you think about yourself as a woman? How do you think about women as a man? How do you think about men as a woman? Did I get that? So emotions, your thoughts, your words, how do you talk to women as a man? A lot of men, if you're calling women bitches and hoes and skanks and skeezers, and that's the language we grew up on, you're not going to be prepared for a positive. Can you imagine? And then you try to have, then children come onto the scene and you still have that language. You have daughters on the scene. It's totally dysfunctional. You see? So you got to deal with your language, the language that you use when you talk to women, that when you talk to men, when you talk about women, when you talk to women. There's deeper levels to this too. I'll outline this inside the video series. And then of course, your behavior. Ultimately, what proves everything is your behavior, because once you get down and it filters down to the behavioral part, that means your actions. Now we're getting into physical reality. And that's why I'm saying that ultimately, if your mind is right, if your thoughts are right, and if your emotional state is right, then what you do day by day as a man and as a woman is going to be right in line with being prepared for a positive relationship. And see, when you know that you're prepared is when you're able to materialize a positive relationship. That's when you know that you're prepared. And see, that's the thing. There are men and women who may say, no, well, there aren't any potential partners out there. That has to do with your mentality about things. That has to do with a limited mentality. Okay, well, you can say that, but is that true? No, it's not true. Well, how do you know that not to be true? Well, because I'm in a positive relationship with a woman right now. We've been together now for 16 years. Again, it all filters down to what's actually taking place in physical reality. So what I'm saying here in a nutshell is that ultimately we start with self. And the first and most important place that we have to deal with is our mentality about ourselves as men, our mentality about ourselves as women. And then, of course, the next level is our mentality about women as men and our mentality about men as women. And then the third level to that is our mentality about relationship. If any of those levels, if we have levels of extreme negativity, then we're not prepared for a positive relationship. And therefore, it makes no logical sense to be pursuing relationships. Once you get your mind in order, you get your emotions in order, you get the words that you speak in order, and you get your behavior in order. And when all of these four things are in alignment with being in a positive relationship, all these four things support a positive relationship. Now you're prepared. So it's not about whether or not you're deserving. It's not about where do I need to go look. It's the ultimate question is whether or not I'm prepared.
So it's about you and your mindset.
That's right.
Before you even go into looking for the relationship.
That's right.
You're writing that down, guys.
Let me just add that no one is in control of your mindset except you. But it's powerful because that shows that you have the power to change your mindset. And you'll be amazed at what begins to take place when you change your mindset towards a positive about any given thing. But again, it's not just your mind. It has to be your words. It has to be your emotions. And ultimately, it has to be your behavior, your actions that you take day by day.
Right. That is so true. So what about another question that somebody brought to me? People who seem to be getting into relationships with the same type of, well, I say it's the same type of person, but like they're always being cheated on or lied to, or, you just kind of, there's always like a dishonesty. There's maybe a man, women seem to always just want them for their money, or, just want what they can get from them, or a certain type of lifestyle. What would you suggest to people who seem to experience, over and over again, the same type of relationship?
Yeah, anytime you experience the same thing over and over again, it's because a lesson hasn't been learned, a valuable lesson that you will need to learn in order to move forward. And see, the lesson some people say that the best lessons are learned from traumatizing experience. I don't believe that. I think that the best lessons are learned through loving experiences. I think for a lot of us, because we've had levels of failure in relationships, there are lessons that are presented to us, but those lessons are very difficult for us to deal with. And in some cases, we ignore the lessons and then we choose the same type of situation all over again. It's a same relationship, but it's just with a different person. Well, does that mean that everybody, and then you get out of that relationship and you get another relationship and it's the same type of relationship, it's just a different person. So what's the factor? The factor that remains? It's not the person, the new person, it's you. In other words, there's something that needs to take place within you, and in particular within your own mind. There's a lesson that needs to be learned. And once you learn that lesson, it's going to put you in a position to recognize that particular experience is no longer going to serve you. In other words, that particular lesson is no longer needed because you've already learned the lesson that particular experience was meant to teach you. But a lot of us, we don't learn the lesson. And there's some reasons why we don't learn the lessons. I just want to give you 3 examples. There are 3 reasons why we don't learn the lessons, and we tend to repeat failure in relationship. And before I do that, because I don't want to paint a grim picture, but I want people to understand something, that the way that life works is you don't fail at anything forever, and you don't succeed at anything forever. The way that life works is you fail, you succeed, you fail, you succeed, you might fail, and then the next experience is success. That's how life works. No one gets the W and the win forever, and no one gets that L or the loss forever. It just doesn't work that way. It's a mixture of failure and success. So what that does mean, though, is that if you've been in relationships and you've had the same experience and it's been based upon you've been having these failures, it doesn't mean that the next experience isn't going to be success, but you have to learn the lesson so that you can make sure you put yourself in the position to have success in the next relationship. So, but there's three reasons why this tends to happen when people have the same type of relationship experience. Number one, it's an issue of patience, and all these things are interconnected. That they weren't patient enough with their own healing process and with the process of learning from the past experience to take some time off from relationships before getting into the next one. And we tend to do that. We tend to choose out of desperation. Never, ever choose out of desperation. You must choose out of intelligence. And you see, intelligence comes from the next thing, and that is research. You have to take the time to be patient enough to research the next potential partner. But also this means you need to research yourself and ask critical questions. Why did I choose this last partner? What were the lessons that I should have learned from that part? And there's always lessons. Some of them are very difficult lessons. Some of the lessons it's like, you know what, you made a bad choice and it was foolish. Okay, well, you should be able to admit that. Why did I choose him? What was the lesson could I have made a better decision? You know, he didn't appear, and this goes for men too. You can flip this around, just using women as an example. He didn't appear that way at first, but then when we got into the relationship, you know, before he was, you know, hey, my queen, and I think you're beautiful, and I love you, and I'm going to take care. But then we got into a relationship. He's like, you know, bitch, this, and fuck you, and you're like, what happened? Well, that was always him. That was always him, and that was always her. You see, but we didn't take the time through patience to do the research and ask critical questions. Why did I choose this person? And what were the red flags that were always there? And they're always there. See, we ignore the red flags. In some cases, we don't see them because we don't take the time with patience to do the research on that potential new partner. But that's what I'm saying. You have to be patient, take some time off from relationships, do some critical thinking and research on the past relationship, and start to be clear about what were the lessons that you were meant to learn. And that's the third thing. One of the reasons why we tend to repeat these failed relationships over and over again is simply we haven't learned a lesson. And you can't learn a lesson by jumping into another relationship. You learn a lesson by asking critical questions about the relationship that just ended, and figuring out what it is that you need to change within yourself so that you can be prepared for a positive relationship. So those are just three things. But again, I want to just say this because I don't want to paint a grim picture. Just because you failed in the last 3 or the last 4 or the last 5 doesn't mean that the next experience is going to be success. With my own wife, I had failure, but by the time I met my wife, I was able to have success. Not because I was jumping into relationships. I was taking breaks in between. But what I was doing was I was self-analyzing. I was asking critical questions about my mentality about women, my mentality about relationships, my language, the words that I was using, my behavior, my emotional state. I was asking critical questions about those things. And as I processed and worked on those things, I was preparing for my wife so that by the time my wife came into my life, I had at least progressed enough to be prepared to establish the seedlings of a positive relationship. But you have to be patient. You have to do the appropriate research, know thyself, but then also research your potential partner. And that takes patience and time. A lot of people rush in far too soon, and then learn the lessons. The lessons happen to be what will provide you with the levels of information that will allow you to make an intelligent decision the next time around, as opposed to making a decision to put yourself back into another dysfunctional relationship.
Brilliant. Do you believe in where they say, I know you had an interesting take on the law of attraction that you mentioned the other day, but do you believe that a person could actually almost like write a shopping list of the person that they want, you know, even down to physical attributes, but more to do with the type of personality they want, you know, the type of person, you know, just all types of things. Just is it what basically what I'm asking is that a intelligent way of you know, trying to look, well, you know, thinking about attracting somebody like that, you know, having all the, you know, writing down exactly what you want. And if the person that comes along doesn't tick all the boxes, you're going to say no.
Yes. Now, one of the things I do when I do coaching sessions, relationship sessions for men and women is that I make it very clear that they must be clear about, and this is part of the preparation process. It doesn't matter if you don't even know what you want. What's the point? You have to at least know what it is that you're looking for. And most people have no clue. So what I'm saying is that one of the things, the exercises, it's an intellectual exercise. More than anything else is I ask people, look, put together a list of 25 internal qualities that you would want. That's character issues. Like, in other words, a man, okay, I want a woman who's jovial. I want a woman who is affectionate. I want a woman who is honest. Most people at the top of the list, they put honesty. That's what they're really looking for. But you should have a list of 25 internal qualities. But then on top of that, you should explain why each one of those things are important to you. And then, because you have to justify them. Why are these things important to you? And then rank them from top to bottom. It's an intellectual exercise. Same thing with physical characteristics. It doesn't matter as much, but it is significant because you have to be attracted to the person that you're with. Just imagine, you know, you're in a relationship with someone, you're not attracted to them, and you want to raise a family with someone that you're not attracted to. I mean, how are you going to engage in enjoyable sexual intercourse if you're not even attracted to the person? So yes, you have to be attracted to the person. It's very important. So write down a list of 25 physical characteristics and don't limit yourself in any way. And then you justify those, you explain why those things are important to you. And then you rank them from top to bottom, most important to least important. Now, the idea is that as an intellectual exercise, you are becoming clear within your mind about what it is that you're looking for. I mean, just think about it, just as a logic here. What's the probability of you establishing a positive relationship with someone that you would want to be in a relationship when you don't even know what type of person you want to be in a relationship with?
True. Very
So
true.
yes, put together your list and make it as clear and concise as possible, and don't limit yourself on any level. Don't limit yourself. Now, does this mean that simply by putting together a list that tomorrow it's going to materialize magically this person that's going to fit? No, that's because that's ridiculous. Life doesn't work that way either. It's a mental exercise to prepare you in terms of male female relationships and knowing exactly what you want. Now, here's the thing. The reason why you rank this list from top to bottom is that the things that in general, the things that go towards the top, those are things, especially when we talk about internal qualities, we're talking about character. The things that are ranked towards the top, you should never compromise on that. Why would you compromise? I want them to be honest. Okay, but this person I'm dealing with, they have all these other qualities and physical characteristics, but they're dishonest. You're going to be in a relationship with someone who's dishonest? It makes no sense. So the things that you rank towards the top, this is an intellectual approach. Those things you do not compromise on. Now, there are going to be other things that are also important that are down towards the bottom of the list, and you can work with someone on that. Or if they don't have those particular qualities, well, then, you can give a little wiggle room. But the things that are ranked towards the top, you never compromise on. Same thing with physical characteristics. They're not as important, but there'll be things towards the top of your physical characteristics that you probably are not going to want to compromise on, and that's okay, but because you don't want to limit yourself in terms of what you want. But then understand that there are going to be things that are going to be down towards the bottom of the list that are not as important. And the idea is to become very clear about what you want and know what it is that is worth compromising on and what it is that you should never, ever compromise on. A lot of the things that you can compromise on in the bigger scheme of things are really not significant. But the things that you should never compromise on, those are the most important things. And again, does this mean that by doing this, automatically tomorrow this man or this woman is going to appear? No, that's not how this works. But it's better for you to when you go and you go try to buy a car, to know exactly what type of car you want than to go into the used car lot or into the new car lot and have them tell you what type of car you want. You see, because you go and that's what happens. A lot of people, they go to that car lot and they have no idea. And then what ends up happening, they walk away with a car that they didn't want. And then the car note is a whole lot more than what they thought. And then they figure out that the car is broken. The engine needs repaired because they didn't know exactly what they wanted. They didn't even bother to do the research to open up the hood and look down and make sure all the parts are working appropriately, or to have a mechanic come and take a look. Well, the same thing applies to relationship. Most people, we have no idea what we're looking for. And again, what's the probability of being able to establish a positive relationship with someone if you don't even know what you're looking for in the first place? So yes, take the time. This is an intellectual process to put together a list, make sure everything is justified. There's a reason why each one of these things is important to you, and rank them from top to bottom. It's just a roadmap, nothing more. It's a roadmap. And when you meet someone, when you check them out, you just go down the list and say, okay, does he or she have these qualities? Which qualities does he have or she have? Which qualities do they not have? And if some of the qualities are things that are towards the top, okay, well, that's probably not the person for you. That's okay. You have hundreds of millions of other options out there. And I mean that literally. You have hundreds of millions of options.
Yes, definitely. And it's so interesting, and it's almost like having a light bulb moment when you say, have an intellectual process of,
Hmm.
of going through that list, because a lot of the time I find that maybe we, especially women, we choose our partners on an emotional level.
Hmm.
It's just the kind of feelings that we have. And maybe with men, it's more of a physical thing because, when they're getting, when you're getting together, they're looking at. I mean, I've had this conversation so many times I cannot count. And one of my friends will tell me, "Oh, she's this, she's that," da, 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 da. And I'm like, "Okay, when you guys met, how did you meet?" And they'll be like, "Oh, well, I saw her in a dance, and we hooked up and blah blah blah." And before they even knew each other's last name, they were probably having a baby together, or
Mm.
something like that.
Yeah,
And then months down the line, you find out that she isn't really what you're looking for, and vice versa. And then it doesn't work out, and you just think like you think that it would have. You know what I mean?
that's right. Hmm.
So, I think we need to kind of, we do treat other aspects of our lives. Like you said, if you're buying a car, a good way to buy cars, do your research, know what you want. you know that they're going to try and upsell you. So you
That's
have
right.
to have the standard. If you're going to buy a house, the same thing. You're going to look at, you know your budget, you know what you're looking for. Do your research. When you go for a job interview or whatever you're doing, um, you know you have to have the required skill sets to be able to do it. If you're going to start your own business, you need to have a business plan. So
Mm,
why would the most important thing in your life would you just go in with no, with no structure? Do you know what I mean? So
mm,
um, it's very interesting. And somebody just said, when you speak what you don't want, that's exactly what you will get because
mm.
you spoke it.
No, that's true. And I think that's another one of the challenges. I talk about this in the video series is that far too many, and I frame it within the context of men, far too many men focus on what they don't want. I mean, why focus on what you don't want? It makes absolutely no sense. Look at that girl there. She's this way and she talks too much. She's disrespectful. She has an attitude. She's always mouthing off and she's not submissive. Well, if that's not what you want, why are you focusing on what you don't want? And one of the and women do this too. I've noticed this. It's very counterproductive in terms of preparing for a positive relationship. I think one of the reasons why we tend to do that, we focus on what we don't want, is because on a subconscious level, we know that we're not prepared for what we do want. And in some cases, we don't even know what we don't want. You see?
Mm,
So that's why I think it's important to be clear about what you do want and focus on that, because the more you focus on that, the more real it becomes. So long as you focus. And see, here's the other thing. I think it's also a form of cowardice, especially, and I'll frame it as for men to do it, because if you simply focus on what you don't want, it doesn't provide you with the motivation or the incentive to continue to work on yourself for what you do want.
mm,
Because in order to have what you do want, you're going to need to put in some personal work. You're going to have to refine your thoughts, your words, your actions, and your behavior. And that takes time. It takes work. But if you just focus on what you don't want, you're not going to have any incentive, any real incentive or motivation to focus on yourself and work on yourself. Whereas if you take the time to focus on what you do want, you're going to be inspired every single day to put in the work on yourself as a man, as an act of personal empowerment, to focus on what you do want. It gives you the inspiration, motivation to work on yourself, to work on your thoughts, your words, your actions, and your behaviors so that you can be in line with being in a positive relationship. So yeah, a lot of people do that. It's totally counterproductive. Why would you focus on what you don't want? Why not focus on what you do want?
definitely. And somebody's written in the chat, real versatile. You're not going to get away with that comment without explaining. It's all good though. I have a new strategy to counter this problem. He's talking about I think he said it earlier in the chat. He met a woman who had all the things that he thought that he wanted, and then she changed a couple of months down the line. So I'm interested to hear what his new strategy is, because I hear this from men a lot as well. They're always saying, "Oh, we can't give away the male code of how we do our things, and all this kind of nonsense." And I'm not saying what you're saying is nonsense, by the way, Wilvis. I'm just saying that sometimes it's good to kind of share so that women can also know what the kind of process that that you're looking for. Because if again, if you don't know what the other person wants either, then how do you know that you're going to be the person for them? Does that make sense? So sometimes I think communication is needed, and that brings me on to long-term relationships now, because we feel there's also this issue of, they call, like, sometimes they have the 7-year itch. They have, there's a lot of cheating going on in relationships. There's a lot of, like, we hear time and time again. There's maybe domestic abuse. The type of job I do, literally all day long, it's another, some type of argument, some type of, whatever's going on. And how can we kind of avoid? Because I always say, well, I've learnt this from another one of my mentors. My home is my sanctuary, so I don't want anything that is going to, upset me, or, put me out of my zone in my home. So
Hmm.
if I feel somebody is going to, be argumentative, or, just give me grief and stress, then it has to be outside of my home, because
Mm.
I don't want it. And I try to encourage my children to kind of be the same way as well. So, just let everything go at the door. If there's a problem, we'll just talk about it. Try and stay away from the, just too much strife, because I grew up in a household where there was a lot of that, and I didn't think it done any good for any of us.
Mm.
So, how can we work towards? Because I'm sure, again, if we look at these people individually, it's not necessarily that they're bad people all the time. But some people clash, and again, I hear a lot of stories. People stay together because of financial reasons, because of the way it will look to other people. All these types of things. So how do we make positive relationships in long-term relationships?
Yeah, well, I think you alluded to it already. I think in the first place, the communication has to be there. And what I mean by communication is that it has to be honest communication. That's why most people at the top of the list, they put, I want someone who's honest. And that includes they're honest with what they say, and what they say is true. And they're not going to lie or deceive their partner. And a lot of people, they do that. They misrepresent themselves, so forth and so on. So I think in communication is key. The thing I would say with my wife and I was that even though we were fairly young, I was 25, she was 21. We were fairly young, but we were not disingenuous with each other. And we took a lot of time early on to talk for hours. I mean, I remember we used to sit in my old Isuzu Trooper, and she wouldn't even let me in her apartment at that time. And I found that to be very attractive. I was like, okay, this is a woman who has, some moral and some ethics. I can appreciate that. She has integrity. And we're sitting outside, and it's freezing cold. There was times that she would bring blankets in, and we would just sit in the car, and I'll be sitting in the driver's seat. She's sitting and we'll be sitting cuddled up. We're cold, and we're talking. We're opening up photo albums, and I'm sharing my history, and she's sharing her history. And we took someone, and it was such. I remember there was times we would do that, and then the sun would start to rise. The sun, and we get to watch the sun rise. And then after a while, she goes in. She gets ready for work, and I'm still waiting outside. After she's done, she comes out, and I drive her and take her to work. Then I go home, take a shower, and I get ready for work. Those types of things, it's invaluable. I mean, in other words, you can't replace that. Being patient and taking the time and having appropriate communication and respectful communication. And one of the things I talk about in the video series for men is part of proper communication is also being attentive to your partner. In other words, that you have to be able to listen and hear. And see, the thing is this, and this is the big point. Most people, when it comes to relationship, their approach to communication is more about arguing. Like, I want to prove to this person that I'm right and that they're wrong. It's totally counterproductive. Ultimately, the reason why we communicate is for the sake of understanding. As human beings, we communicate because we want to understand. Genevieve, when we're talking here, we just want to have a level of understanding. Well, the same thing applies to any type of relationship. When it comes to communication, think about it. When we we want someone else to transmit information to us, and we want to interpret that information so that we have a better understanding about them, or a better understanding about their message, or a better understanding about life. It doesn't really matter, but it's ultimately the communication. The objective is to develop understanding. Most people don't approach, when it comes to long-term relationships, at a certain point, it's not about understanding, it's about arguing. And one of the things that I can say about my wife and I is that we don't argue, we never have, and we never will. Why waste time arguing? Plus, we have 5 children. We have to be on the same team. It's enough to deal with these 5 children every single day. Why are we going to be sitting around arguing? And plus, we don't want to provide them with that modeling. Like you, Genevieve, I saw a lot of that when I was growing up. It's totally dysfunctional. It's traumatizing for a child to see. Why would we want to present that to our children? So the idea is, and this is what I want men to understand, because I think this is something that we can definitely improve upon all the way across the board, is to always seek understanding. It's not about arguing. It's not about proving your point. It's not about getting into your ego. It's not about that. Same thing for you women. It's not about that. It's about, I want to understand you. And she should come from a vantage point of, I want to understand you as a man. And see, if we always come from a place of understanding, we're more careful with our words. We always ask the question, will my words hurt, or will my words help, or will my words harm? When we argue, our words end up harming. Things escalate, and at a certain point we're cursing, and at a certain point we're even raising our voice. Our tone is totally improper. The tone that we use, all this, we need to consider this when we talk about communication. And then we get into cursing them and yelling. And so totally contradictory to establishing a long-term positive relationship. So what I would say, Genevieve, is that in the first place, to develop communication, proper communication skills. And here's the thing, and I talk about this in the video series, that as men and women for that matter, The primary time for you to be able to develop that skill of communicating, and not just communicating and talking, but also developing the skill to be attentive and listening for the sake of understanding, is while you're single. If you, as a man or a woman for that matter, if you're online arguing with women and men all day long and you're just fussing and fighting, and that man says this, I can't believe you said that, and I don't believe that, and you're going back and you're just wasting time, but you're also training yourself to be dysfunctional when it comes to communicating. See, right now, and see, the whole thing is I want to argue. I want to prove that you're wrong, because there's no good black men out there. There's no good black women out there. And I believe that. So why would I expect to have a positive communication with you? Why would I even think to somehow try to seek understanding? I already have this negative view. So I'm going to prove my negative view by having this argument with you. Is going to blow out of proportion. By the time we're done, I'm going to call you out your name. You call me out my name. We'll leave and we're both unhappy. It's a wasted opportunity. See, right now is the time to practice. Men, now is the time to practice. Practice talking with women respectfully, with no ulterior motives or with no intent, to even be in a relationship with them. It should basically be for the sake of understanding. I have another saying, same thing for women. I have another saying that every single man should seek to understand women, and every single man should seek to understand the woman that he's with. And the way that you understand is through proper communication, not through arguing. So in other words, communication is about understanding. And if we approach it that way, it will decrease the likelihood of us engaging in dysfunctional communication patterns, including arguing. And if we can enhance the manner in which we communicate with each other as men and women, then we'll put ourselves in a much better position to establish a long-term positive relationship.
Brilliant. That is so powerful. So guys, you've heard it from somebody who is in a successful relationship, never had an argument with his wife, has
Never.
5 children, and anyone who's got children know that, they try you sometimes.
That's
They
right.
try
My
you.
wife, that's right. My wife and I, we've had to be a team. It's the only way. And let me say this too, because I want to also make sure, because I don't want to misrepresent my relationship with my wife. It does not mean that we haven't had disagreements, and it doesn't mean that we have not had challenges. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that we have always been careful with the manner in which we've communicated with each other. There's no way. I do not want, and even not just even with my daughters, the tone that I use. That's another thing I talk about in the video series. Our tone when we talk to women, there should be a particular type of loving tone that we use. We shouldn't be talking to them like this. We should be really talking with them in such a way wherein they feel more comfortable. Same thing with my daughters. I can't talk, hey, go do this. I can't talk to them like that. One of my daughters, she'll start to cry. She's very emotional. So what do? Hey, baby, how are you doing? Yeah, okay. Well, what did you need something? You see how my tone changes? It's not just the words, but it's also the tone that makes them feel more comfortable, makes them feel more at ease. And I've been very careful about that with my wife. But I want to make this point, that there was a time wherein my communication was so backwards, because what I used to do whenever we had a disagreement, we didn't argue, but what I would do is I would just shut down. You see, that's because I wasn't emotionally mature enough to deal with the feelings that I was having, or the emotions that I was having in my body, let alone the feelings that I was experiencing at that time. And I would literally shut down. And it took a long time for me to begin to open up and communicate. And guess what? Even to this day, I can still do a better job. In fact, while I was working on the video series, I paused and I said, because I was talking about the need for men to be more attentive towards women, and why that's important when it comes to being prepared for a positive relationship. And I said, well, hold on, I have to say something. And I have to be honest. I'm saying this in the video series. I said, look, this is something that I still need to work on and do better at, being more attentive to my wife, because I have a problem with sometimes she asks in my opinion, she asks too many questions back to back to back, and I don't really have time to answer the first one, and I get overwhelmed and then I just ignore. Okay. And see, in the video series, I say, well, we could probably say that maybe she's asking too many questions, but no, as men, what we do is we figure out a way to be able to not shut down and not ignore and answer each question one at a time. You see, so I make it very clear that even within my own ability to communicate, and I consider myself to be a fairly decent communicator, that this is an area that I can definitely improve upon for the sake of my relationship with my wife. So again, I'm not trying to put up any type of pretense with any of you out there that somehow our relationship is perfect or that somehow I'm perfect. What I am saying is that part of being a man of integrity is that you do look at, and a woman of integrity is that you make sure you also look at your imperfections. You look at the things that are under the hood that need to be fixed. You open up that hood of the car and you look, and then you begin to work day by day. The more you work on these things, the more prepared you'll be for a positive relationship. If you're already in a relationship, the more you work on these things, the more positive your relationship becomes.
Mm. Yeah, that's definitely true, because there's definitely things that even in myself that I identified over the years that you know, definitely it's not, sometimes it's not even that it's necessarily a bad thing or a
Mm.
bad element of yourself, but if it's
Hmm.
not, if it doesn't counteract or you know, doesn't work well with the other person,
Mm.
then it's, you know, it's going to be friction. Like, for example, I know you brought up you don't believe that men are the head of the household. However, if, you know, if a man feels that, you know, he wants to be, you know, the sole breadwinner and he wants to go out there and do whatever he wants for his family, you know, a woman that wants to be, you know, wants to kind of do the same thing, it's not going to work. You have to have that balance of, okay, who's going to be the one that's going to, you know, stay at home or whatever. Even though, because, you know, we live in a society now that sometimes men stay at home and you know, they look after children and women go out to work whichever way it works. But you know, if both of you can't be doing the same thing, because it's not going to work. Whereas if you have a balance and have an understanding of who's going to do what, then it will work better. And that's one of the things that I identified. You know, I feel like I can do everything, and when you meet somebody that kind of wants to take over things for you, you're like, no, I don't want you to do that. I mean, it's like, come on, like, why are we having this friction over just functioning? You know what I mean? So it's definitely something that we definitely need to kind of consider all the time. Do you know what I mean? And just like you say, it's a work in progress, because there might be
Yes.
different things. You may have overcome one thing, but then there's another thing that you could do better at. I mean, I don't know if you are familiar with like the love languages, but you know, it speaks of finding what you know, what really works for the other person. And you know, if they you know, some people like things being done for them, whereas some people like affectionate words, and other people like, you know, just different types of things. So you've got to work out what works for your for your other partner,
That's
and
right.
then you need to work out what's yours. And again, as we said in the chat before, if you don't even know that, I really like when somebody says something nice to me, or I really like when, you know, my partner takes the bins out, or without me asking, even though like it's done every day, the same day every week. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it really makes you feel so much better that that
Mm.
person actually did that without you asking him, reminding him, whatever the case
Hmm.
may be. And on the other hand, you know, you said, oh, you know what, you look really smart today. I really like that haircut. You know, it's just, you've got to work out what it is. So we, you know, we really need to kind of go back to basics. And you know, I think in almost every answer that you've given, you've alluded back to your your mindset, and it
Mm.
really is kind of down to you know, your person. Whereas we're always kind of looking for, well, they don't do that and they aren't like that, and you know, that person is like that. Whereas really we kind of need to take it back to ourselves and say, well,
That's right.
what are we? Because we may be being portrayed as a, you know, something to another person that they might not like, or they might
Hmm.
like. So, you know, it's very interesting, and I think you've given us a lot of scope in terms of understanding that perspective, and I'm sure that it will go deeper in your series that you speak of. But I just quickly want to move on to, as you say, you've got five children,
Hmm.
and you know, as I said, I've been watching you for almost 8 9 years, and they're, you know, they're very pleasant children, and you've homeschooled them, so they've been, you know, at home with you guys all that time. Um, you know, give us some parental tips, because
Mm.
we're definitely, you know, I mean, not everyone's doing a bad job, but you know, we're having a lot of struggles with, you know, like I explained to you before, in the UK with gang culture.
Mm.
One of the reasons that I moved out of London and moved to, you know, a more quieter part of the UK was I literally didn't want, the job that I do, I kind of get to see all the kind of things that are going on in the area. So I knew that if my children started secondary school, which I don't know what you would call it in America, maybe like middle school, like high
Hmm.
school. Um, if they got to that, if they got to that age and was in school in that particular area, there was probably a 90% chance that they would end up in some form of gang or getting into
Mm.
some kind of trouble, and ultimately the worst things that could happen. So I decided that I was going to move out of the area, just to protect my children. Having boy children, they're as the demographic being black boys and etc. All the statistics. I was like, no, I'm not taking a chance. I can't do it. I'm going. So that's
Mm.
what I did. But there's still a community of people that are there. And to be honest with you, the problem is everywhere. It's just maybe not as that prevalent in other areas. Because I particularly went into a small town where there's one train out, and it's very, there's not much going on. And to be honest, everyone kind of knows everyone. So if anything happens, it can be dealt with pretty quickly, sort of thing. Um, but there's still struggles. So, what kind of, I suppose with younger kids, you have your issues and stuff that you need to work on, and a lot of the things start from younger anyway. But can you give any tips or guidance for parents that are going through, and especially with single mothers, because single mothers get a lot of stick in terms of how they raise, especially their boys
Mm.
and girls too, but they get a lot of stick of, oh, it's your fault if he gets into trouble with the police or goes to prison or something happens to him, gets into gangs. So is there any tips that you could give women or parents in that
Yeah.
respect?
Well, yeah. Well, in parents in general, I think the most important thing is to be present, and not only be present but aware. You have to actually be aware of what's taking place in your child's life. And that can be a challenge for people just in general, because maybe they have a situation where they don't see their children as much as maybe they would like. Their children is, let's say, the children at school for a significant period of time each day. The parent is at work for a significant period of time. At some point, when you all come together, it's important for conversations to be had, and keeping the lines of communication open so that information is always passed for the sake of understanding. Again, being consciously aware of what your children is dealing with day by day, but also to have a better understanding about where your child is at in their own development. So I would say that in the first place, um, be consciously aware of the world that your children is experiencing day by day. And you do that through by understanding, and what that means is having appropriate conversations and dialogue each day. It should be something that takes place every single day. The other thing too, that I would say, if you're raising boys and you're a single mother, what you've done, Genevieve, is very important. I think that, to move out of that location uh, was a stellar move, because what we will find is that oftentimes the manner in which boys get involved with behaviors that are destructive, it oftentimes it takes place in terms of their surroundings, their socialization process, whether that is at school or if it's just in the community or what have you. And we just moved 2.5 months ago, from a neighborhood that wasn't too nice. And by getting here where we're at now, it's peaceful, it's quiet, nature out here. People, children all like to come over here to play. It's very important. It's very important for me as a father, because my oldest son is 13, and then I don't want my son growing up. I just could not see that. Like, we have to get up out of here. There's no way. That's very important too. So I think part of what that speaks to is, as parents, doing whatever it takes in order to put your child in a position to not have as much negative social influence that may be around. And you can do that. And in some cases, it's simply an issue of proximity, moving to a different location. But then, even if that's not possible, to make sure that you talk with your child about what is taking place in that community, or what the dysfunctional behaviors that are taking place in that community, and why it is that they need to be on guard. Why it is that why they should have an understanding of why that type of behavior is destructive, and where that particular type of behavior can lead to. And that way they can intellectualize within their own mind what is appropriate behavior and what's inappropriate behavior. This is something that my wife and I, we've been intellectualizing with our children from the beginning. What is appropriate and what is inappropriate. And if you set that foundation early on, even if you have to still live in those types of those types of environments, your children, because of their intellectual understanding and especially their understanding about what's appropriate and what's inappropriate, what's functional, what's dysfunctional behavior, that will function as a buffer zone. In other words, it's a natural defense mechanism. So as they're interacting with other people, the amount of negative social influence won't be as great upon your child, because your child has already intellectualized the truth of what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. I think that goes a long way, but you have to start at a very early age with the intellectual process. And one other thing I want to say, because my mother was a single mother, my father was in the home up until the age of 13. And my mother, and even while he was in the home, he was on drugs and he was an alcoholic as well. Very destructive force. She managed to raise 6 children basically by herself while dealing with the alcoholic and drug addict husband. And that's why when I see males in particular have all of these disparaging things to say about single Black women, I have an aversion to that. And the reason why is because they don't understand what it takes for a Black woman to raise her boys and girls, for that matter, alone. They have no idea about what that feels like. The financial strains, the level of stress, the level of worry, the levels of doubt, trying to manage the home, make sure bills are paid, make sure food is on the table. They have no idea about what that feels like or what it's like, the types of mental pressure, physical pressure that's associated with that. And for them to, therefore, without having the levels of compassion and levels of understanding for single Black women, for them to go on a campaign to disrespect those women as if those women are doing something wrong and everything they do needs to be criticized, I think that that's disingenuous. I don't think that that's coming from an intellectual place. I think it comes from a place of ignorance. And there's no way that I can condone that behavior. In fact, what I would say that as a man, if you are a man of integrity, instead of seeking to disrespect those women, what is it that you can do to assist those women? And it doesn't even have to be anything physical per se. What words can you offer to them that's going to provide them with encouragement or levels of security, just by saying, hey, look, everything is going to be okay, as opposed to, because you're a single mother, your child is going to turn out bad. Because you're a single mother, your son is going to be in the prison industrial complex. Because you're a single mother, your daughter is going to she's going to be pregnant by the time she's 12, 13 years old. You see the difference in orientation. A man of integrity, what he does is he figures out, what can I do in order to offer some level of support to the woman who is struggling with raising children by alone. And that's one of the things I've been very careful about. It's one thing to criticize a person because of their character. Maybe they are of poor character, and I'm a firm believer that if someone is of poor character, then that needs to be called out. In other words, if they are not a person of integrity, that needs to be called out. But simply saying that because the woman is a single mother, that somehow she's of poor character, I think that that's intellectually disingenuous. And I've seen a lot of men do that. That's inappropriate. That should not be done. There are plenty of women who are of good character, but because of experiences that they have had, they're in a position right now where they're raising their children alone. And a man of integrity, what he does is he offers some level of support, even if that's kind words of encouragement. And we need to do a better job with that.
I definitely agree. It kind of I felt to understand the, the concept of somebody putting somebody down who's kind of, in a situation where a single mother is by herself.
Yeah.
Well, obviously she's by herself, but she's raising her children by herself. And the way I see it is that she's the one that chose to stick around for those children.
That's right. That's right.
There are people that haven't, there's women that have walked away from their children.
That's
so,
right.
Regardless of how difficult it is, and, we don't get a manual on how to be a good parent when we have children. And, somebody in the chat said, but I don't think that it can happen when the parent hasn't dealt with their own childhood. That is the problem. So, sometimes, we have struggles in our own childhoods, and, with them, we're raising children and we're kind of passing on the same things again. So it's almost like a perpetual cycle. So, like you said, all we can do is offer the encouragement, especially the people with integrity, the men with integrity. It's not to say that they have to necessarily physically go and do something or, whatever, but just offering those words of advice, maybe even trying, mentoring the children. Because,
there you go.
good. I always say that if there's no father around, there's nothing wrong with having good role models, male role models around,
Mhm.
and find someone. And if you can't find someone online. Like there's Lenon Honor. Yes, he's a good role model. If you can't find someone in your vicinity, um, find someone online because one of the things of me moving here and obviously not knowing a lot of people, I'm very mindful of that saying that you are like the what is it they say you're like the five people that you spend the most time with, um, and you know I realized that the people that I had to spend the most time with due to work and whatever. Not to say that I love my colleagues, but they we're all kind of on the same page. So I want to be around people that are aspiring to do better and like I can look up to them sort of thing. So I had to find different ways of connecting with people that I wanted to be like, and sometimes it was via the internet. So rather than spending your time bashing people that you don't like on the internet, why not find people that you aspire to be like? And it's not to say to put anybody as like a Jesus figure or just put them on a pedestal because like everyone's human and everyone makes mistakes, but you can take aspects of what you see somebody doing well at and say, yeah, I want to aspire to be like that and see what they've done to achieve that and just use it as something to kind of encourage yourself because sometimes that's what we've got to do. Sometimes when we're in a situation where we're not around anybody that can inspire us, we have to find ways of doing it, and
Mm.
we can use like things like the internet to positive rather than all the negative that it's been used for. What would you say to that?
Yeah, well, again, why focus on what you don't want? And a lot of people do that. If you want more positivity in your life, then you should probably focus on more positive things. If you need more support, then you should focus on those who are giving positive support. If there's people who they say that they want a better life, but then they go online and they're dealing with people who have very negative views about life in general. It's thoroughly counterproductive. And I'm going to say this again. There's nothing wrong, again, with having a critique in terms of inappropriate behavior.
Mm.
You see, that's one thing. If a person lacks integrity, if they are lying, they're cheating, they're stealing, that's one thing. I think that we need to do a better job at calling that out. But it's another thing to dehumanize people simply because of the situation that they are in. In other words, that a woman who is a single mother, that simply because she's a single mother, that gives us a good reason to demean and disrespect her. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Same thing. There are men who are single fathers. Do we have the same type of negativity directed at single fathers? Not at all. And I know some single fathers. They don't get women on there, talking about how their children are going to turn out poorly because he's a single fathers don't get that type of treatment. So again, if it's someone again who's living a life that is destructive and is abusive of other people and they're taking advantage, I think that needs to be called out. But we should never issue levels of negativity to people on any level simply because of their situation. And deeper still, if we wish to develop more happiness in our life, then we should be going towards and we should be moving towards information and towards those people who are going to deliver that happiness to our lives and who are going to be positive forces in our lives. And one other thing I want to say, Genevieve, because you brought it up, the other thing that I was going to recommend in terms of mothers who are raising boys is, yes, make sure you provide them with positive male role models. That is so very important. Because that becomes another defense mechanism against a lot of the negative social pressure that they're going to receive in general. That if you provide them with positive role models, male figures who are men of integrity, I'm going to say it again, they are men of integrity. They do not lie, cheat, or steal. They do not manipulate. These are men of integrity. If you can provide them with that type of modeling, it goes a long way because it becomes a defense mechanism as they internalize those qualities within themselves as being young boys of integrity, growing into young men of integrity. When they receive the negative social pressure and the negative social influence, they'll have a very strong defense mechanism wherein they will remain centered in their own integrity. That's very important.
Brilliant. That is so powerful. Well, Lennon, I'm going to thank you. I could ask you a million more questions, but I know I've taken a lot of your time today, as I know you've got a lot of things to do. So I just want to wrap up saying that yes, you're beyond gangster blackface. Um, could can you just say it because I'm
Yes, yes, you got it. Beyond Gangster Blackface, a critical analysis of gangster
yeah.
rap. And I want to
Um,
encourage, yeah, everyone to go check it out. It's
Yeah,
online.
check that out. That's online. I will put the link for that. You can either purchase a DVD
Hmm.
or you can actually watch it online. I'll post both of the websites there. And Lennon is actually just in the process of releasing his positive relationship series, how to have a positive relationship with a woman.
Hmm.
And he will be doing his how to have a positive relationship with a man, I do believe, in the future. Um, so yes, please, just look out for that because I'm telling you, it will change your life. So I will put all the information in the description box of this video. Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to us, and thank you to your family for allowing us to have this time with you. As I did mention, I'm hoping to get his wife, Aida, on an interview as well, so we can see the equal half to Leonard, and get a woman's perspective, and also I've got loads of questions to ask her about just how does she do it because I need some tips. I need some tips on how to function, how to get everything done, how she's an entrepreneur, she looks after 5 children and she homeschools. She obviously has more than 24 hours in the day because I don't know how it's done, but hopefully you can get some tips of that. So yes, and also to let you guys know, this channel has been nominated for an award for Vlogger of the Year by the Reba Awards. So if you would like to vote for me, if you like what you see and you'd like to vote for me to win that award, go to rebaawards.com. I'll also put that information in the description bar. And you can vote for me so I get an award and like be all like awardy and stuff. So yeah, but yeah, no, I really enjoy bringing on positive people like Lennon. I said I've been watching him for a long, long, long time, and there's times when him and his family has given me so much encouragement. Like I said, I just feel like I'm just like the crazy sister that right? So yeah, anytime you come over to the UK, we've got you definitely got to link up and do some stuff. You need to have some kind of seminar or something over here because like we really need the information.
Mm.
But thank you so much. So
Oh,
thank you guys in the chat room. And is there anything you want to say to close out, Lennon?
oh, I just want to say thank you, Genevieve. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. And also, please tell your sons I said hello.
Yeah, I'll probably let them come and say hi when we come off the air because
Oh, okay, okay.
I can hear them like banging upstairs. I don't know what they're doing right now. But
Oh, I
yeah,
understand.
thank you guys. All right, go to end the chat now. Bye. Yeah. Okay, we've stopped. No, we haven't stopped streaming. Hold on, 'cause I'm in the wrong thing.